Welcome to the Podcast Rodeo Show. I'm your host, Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com. This is where we grab a random podcast and see how long I can hang on. Then I take my 15 years of podcasting experience and give you an honest first impression. And today we are looking at Cryptid Encounters. You can find them at cryptidencounterspodcast.com. And according to our good friends at Apple, here is their description. Cryptid Encounters, it's a podcast where we learn about the mysterious, the strange, the unknown, Bigfoot, UFOs, the paranormal, and of course, the cryptids. And so we're going to listen to their very first episode. Now that right there takes a little bit of courage, because I don't know if they know this yet, but when you get to episode 10, episode 1 is going to make you cringe. But before we listen to that, let's remember one thing that we need.
Following is an opinion, and only an opinion. These are actual, honest first impressions. If you don't like the opinion, feel free to never listen again.
All right, here we go.
Welcome to Cryptid Encounters, where we learn about the mysterious, the strange, the unknown, the paranormal, and of course, the cryptids. I'm your host, Jerry Lopez, and I hope you enjoy the show we have for you tonight. And thank you for listening. Are we alone in the universe? This has been a question that has baffled science for years. The scientific community is mostly split on the subject, but more and more, experts are starting to admit that the probability of alien life is very high. However, there are those who claim to have had encounters with aliens.
My first impression is you are reading this, and not horribly, but it's pretty obvious that you're reading this.
Encounters with alien life in one form or another. Strange sightings, possession, abduction, experimentation. Stories of these echo in certain communities and have fueled pop culture for decades. The story takes place in my home state of Alaska. On November 17th, 1986, one of the best known and most conclusive examples of UFO encounters happened in the skies above Alaska. It was also one of the largest cover-ups by the American government in history that can be conclusively proven, mainly because of the personal encounters with UFOs experienced by then President Ronald Reagan and the courage of an FAA whistleblower. Why would the government try to hide evidence of extraterrestrials from the world when it would be one of the greatest discoveries of mankind? A CIA operative assigned to the case had an answer.
That's where reading gets a little weird. That last little section that you just had there had some bizarre pauses in it. I'm going to go back 15 seconds here just to listen, because you're like, the CIA operative, I think it was something like that. Let's hear that again.
And the courage of an FAA whistleblower. Why would the government try to hide evidence of extraterrestrials from the world when it would be one of the greatest discoveries of mankind? A CIA operative assigned to the case had an answer. It would send people of the world into an unprecedented global panic. In essence, the world can't handle the truth. That might be true for some of us. Japanese airliner Flight 1628 departed Paris with a belly full of specialty Beaujolais wine. The Boeing 747 cargo plane had 3 experienced pilots on board. Senior Captain...
I'll be honest with you, I can't get over the fact that you're just reading this. And there's these weird kind of like, you'll be talking in the middle of a sentence and there's a pause. I don't know what's going on. The other thing, and this bugs me, and this is Dave listening through the ears of a podcaster. I don't understand why you're putting in this great soundscaping and your show is in mono. That's a head scratcher.
Senior Captain Kenji Terauchi, an ex-fighter pilot, was flying the plane, accompanied by his 2 co-pilots and the flight engineer. All 3 witnessed the strange objects and events. All 3 combined total more than 46 years of flying experience, with Terauchi racking up over 10,000 hours as a fighter pilot. All 3 related the same events independently and were deemed to be credible witnesses. The flight path took them to Reykjavik, Iceland, and then across the northern Canadian territories of the Yukon, close to the Arctic Circle, before flying over central Alaska, near Anchorage. The skies in Alaska were clear, and the visibility was unhindered for miles. Because of this, Captain Terryuchi was able to see 2 lights appear in the distance, one yellow and one amber, which he knew weren't beacons, and those lights were always red, according to international protocol. Captain Terryuchi focused on these lights intently, wondering if they belonged to another plane, and he saw one change angle slightly while the other remained stationary. His instrument panel showed only one light, and that light was over 8 miles ahead. The other light didn't show on his radar at all. He watched the phenomenon intensely for 6 minutes before he decided to call in to the Anchorage air traffic controller.
Couple things. I really like the fact that you've taken the time to get all this kind of ooh-ah music going on in the background. I find it, and I see now as I'm on your website, you're using buzzsprout. That's one of the things that I find frustrating about buzzsprout. They convert your file to mono, and if you pay more to have it in stereo, they export it at 192, which is too high a bit rate. It's weird. The other thing is, because we are at, as I look at my phone here, 3 minutes and 49 seconds, and we're just now getting to the saucers. And so you gave a lot of information at the beginning. If the idea here is let's talk about UFOs over Alaska, do we need, you included a lot of content that I didn't need to. Now, I like the fact that you said this happened in Alaska where I live. That's a cool way to kind of let people know a little bit about you. But I think there's probably some information in there that we didn't need. We didn't need a whole ton of backstory. I don't know. It just, to me, I was like, let's get to because you said you could prove this. That's the part that caught my eye. That's the part I was listening for. You're like, hey, this can be proven. And I was like, okay, well, let's just get to that and say, hey, some guy saw a bunch of lights over Alaska. Let me show you how to prove it. That's what I'm listening for because I already know it's about UFOs and stuff. So what kind of, I don't know. Just to me, it was moving a little slow. And like I say, it's kind of odd that you have all this cool soundscaping, and I will give you credit. It wasn't too loud. Most times when people are doing soundscaping, they get too involved in the soundscaping to where you can't hear the words anymore. So that was another thing you did correctly. Now, normally I do not comment on somebody's website because that's something I do on the podcast review show. That's a show I do with Eric K. Johnson. It's really hard to find subscribe buttons on your website, and you want these as episodes. As I go right now to not membership episodes, but just good old, honestly, you have a Patreon. Okay, can we say the cart is a little bit before the horse here? If I want to listen to these episodes, if I go to show notes, no. So you're missing the ball here. You want to put your episodes on your website with your show notes, because really all the podcast is, it's a blog with the media associated with it. Now behind there's this whole RSS feed, but I would work on reading these a little more because you weren't monotone, but you got a long you got a long way to go before you're too sing-songy, where somebody is constantly changing the word of their voice, and it just seems like that everything they're doing is, oh my gosh, it's so amazingly sing-songy. You got a long way to go before you're that. So I would do that and see and this is just me. If somebody's telling me a story, I prefer they just talk like I'm sitting across the room. So if somebody said, what would I do about this? I would go back and see how much of that beginning can I cut out and just let's get to the UFOs. Do we need to know what kind of plane it was? And they were flying from Hong Kong to Puerto Rico to blah, blah. Don't know that I really care about that. I just need to know they got up in a plane in Alaska and they saw these two things. That for me, because there's a great book. I talk about it all the time called Storyworthy by Matthew Dix. And he talks about when you think about that pinpoint, that thing that makes the story, go the smallest amount back as you can. Like how close to the main point can we start? Because so many times we include a lot of backstory. So, but on the good news is you've actually started a podcast And many people cannot get that thing off the ground. And of course, that's what I help people with when you come over to the School of Podcasting.com. Now, if you want to get your show reviewed, it's super easy. Just go over to podcastrodeoshow.com, click on the link at the top of the screen, and you'll have your podcast right here in front of not just my ears, but my audience's ears. And if you want to hear the rest of this, you're like, wait, Dave, I want to hear what happened to the flying saucers in the sky. Go over to Cryptid, and that is CRYPTID Encounters with an S, podcast.com. And so you can hear the rest of this, although, well, there's a whole other thing. You have a show player, no episodes, but you're on episode 2. So the good news is you're off the ground. If you need help with that, this is the kind of stuff I do at the schoolofpodcasting.com. But if you want a review, again, podcastrodeoshow.com. Click on the review button at the top. You'll see there are multiple variations of that, and I would be happy to help you. Thanks so much for listening. This is Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, reminding you that there's always room for improvement.